Hey there, first grade. It's so good to see you. I am excited to share with you the next part of chapter 7. So, when we left off with Ramona yesterday, she was feeling kind of nervous in her kind of big girl all by herself room. So, she's always shared a room with Beezus, and now she has her own room, which she really, really wanted. But now she's a little scared, and she doesn't want to tell anybody she's scared because then she's afraid that they'll take the room away from her and give it to Beezus. So we were in the middle of chapter 7, and Ramona had just jumped onto her bed and was hiding kind of under her covers with all of her stuffies. Okay, and so now we'll finish up chapter 7. The moment Ramona dreaded had come. There was no one awake to protect her. Ramona tried to lie as flat and as still as a paper doll so that something slithering under the curtains and slinking around the walls would not know she was there. She kept her eyes wide open. She longed for her father to come home. She was determined to stay awake until morning. Ramona thought of Beezus safely asleep in the friendly dark of the room they had once shared. She thought of the way they used to whisper and giggle and sometimes scare themselves. Even their quarrels were better than being alone in the dark. She ached to move, to ease her muscles, rigid from lying still so long. But she dared not. She thought of the black gorilla with fierce little eyes and the book in her bookcase, and tried to shove the thought out of her mind. She listened for cars on the wet street and strained her ears for the sound of a familiar motor. After what seemed like hours and hours, Ramona caught the sound of the Quimby car turning into the driveway. She went limp with relief. She heard her father unlock the back door and enter. She heard him pause by the thermostat to turn off the furnace. She heard him turn off the living room light and tiptoe down the hall. "Daddy," whispered Ramona. Her father stopped by her door. "You're supposed to be asleep." "Come here for just a minute." Mr. Quimby stepped into Ramona's room. "Daddy, turn on the light a minute, please." "It's late." Mr. Quimby did as he was told. The light which made Ramona squint was relief. She held up her hand to shield her eyes. She was so glad to see her father standing there in his bowling clothes. He looked so good and so familiar and made her feel so safe. "Daddy, you see that big book in my bookcase?" "Yes." "Take it out of my room," said Ramona. To herself she thought, "Please don't ask me why." She added to protect herself from any questions, "It's a good book. I think you might like it." Mr. Quimby pulled the book from the bookcase, glanced at it, and then bent over and kissed Ramona on the forehead. "Okay, no more stalling, young lady," he said. "You were supposed to be asleep hours ago." He turned out the light and left, taking Wild Animals of Africa with him, and leaving Ramona alone in the dark to worry about the mysterious noises made by an old house cooling off for the night. She wondered how much of the 6 months was left before she could return to her old room. She lay as flat and as still as a paper doll while she listened to her father splashing in the shower. Ramona had to think about her eyelids to force them to stay open. Her father got into bed. Her parents were whispering, probably talking about her, saying, "What are we going to do about Ramona always getting into trouble? Even her teacher doesn't like her." Everyone was asleep but Ramona, whose eyelids grew heavier and heavier and heavier. She was afraid of the dark, but she would not give up the new room. Only babies were afraid to sleep alone. The next morning, as Ramona took her sandwiches out of the refrigerator and put them in her lunchbox, Mrs. Quimby asked, "Does your throat feel all right?" "Yes," answered Ramona crossly. "Oh, okay. Well, sore throats are going around," said Mrs. Quimby. Since she had gone to work in the pediatrician's office, she looked for symptoms in her daughters. Last week it had been chickenpox spots, and the week before, swollen glands. "Mama, I had a bad dream last night." "Oh, what did you dream?" "Something was chasing me, and I couldn't run." The dream was still vivid in Ramona's mind. She had been standing at the corner of the house where the zinnias used to be. She knew something terrible was about to come around the corner of the house to get her. She stood as if frozen, unable to lift her feet from the grass. She had been terrified in her dream, and yet the yard had looked clear and bright. The grass was green, the zinnias blooming in shades of pink and orange and scarlet, so real Ramona felt she could have touched them. Beezus was rinsing her cereal bowl under the kitchen faucet. "Ugh, that old dream," she remarked. "I had it several times, and it's awful." "You did not." Ramona was indignant. Her dream was her own, not something passed down from Beezus like an old dress or old rain boots. "You were just saying that." "I did too, have it." Beezus shrugged off the dream as of little importance. "Everybody has that dream." "Ramona, are you sure you feel all right?" asked Mrs. Quimby. "You seem a little cranky this morning." Ramona scowled. I am not cranky. Another dream I don't like, said Beezus, is the one where I'm standing in my underwear in the hall at school and everybody's staring at me. That's just about the worst dream there is. That, too, was a familiar dream to Ramona, not that she was going to admit it. Beezus needn't think she dreamed all the dreams first. Mrs. Quimby looked at Ramona scowling by the refrigerator with her lunchbox in her hand. She laid her hand on Ramona's head to see if she was feverish. Ramona jerked away. I'm not sick and I'm not cranky, she told her mother, and flounced out the door on her way to another day in room 1. When Ramona reached Glenwood School, she trudged into the building where she sat huddled at the foot of the staircase that led to the upper grades. She wondered what it would be like to spend her days in one of the upstairs classrooms. Anything would be better for the first grade. What if I don't go into room 1, she thought. What if I hide in the girls' bathroom until school's out? Before she found the answer to her question, Mr. Cardoza came striding down the hall on his way to the stairs. He stopped directly in front of Ramona. Mr. Cardoza was a tall, thin man with dark hair and eyes, and he made Ramona sitting there on the bottom steps feel very small. Mr. Cardoza frowned and pulled down the corners of his mouth in a way that made Ramona understand that he was poking fun at the expression on her face. Suddenly he smiled and pointed at her as if he had made an exciting discovery. Startled, Ramona drew back. I know who you are, Mr. Cardoza spoke, as if identifying Ramona was the most interesting thing that could have happened. You do? Ramona forgot to scowl. You are Ramona Quimby, also known as Ramona Q. Ramona was astonished. She had expected him to tell her, if he knew who she was at all, that she was Beatrice's little sister. How do you know? She asked. I get around, he said, and whistling softly through his teeth, started up the stairs. Ramona watched him take steps 2 at a time with his long legs, and suddenly felt more cheerful. Cheerful enough to face room 1 once more. A teacher from the upper grades knew the name of a little first grader. Maybe someday Mr. Cardoza would be her teacher, too. So Ramona manages to kind of turn her bad night, her bad day upside down. But the day isn't over, and she heads into first grade for the day, room 1. And the next chapter, the title is Ramona Says a Bad Word. Uh-oh. Poor Ramona. Things are just always so hard for her. So we'll read together on Friday, and we will talk about the bad word Ramona said. I'm sure none of you have ever done that. All right, guys. Have a great afternoon, and I will see you tomorrow.